This is Motivation. I'm Lori Joy Kingwell.
And I'm Chrissy Van. We're two dreamers on two wheels inspired by our community.
And celebrating the voices we're just lucky enough to discover along the ride. So if not already, like, subscribe, follow along, do what you gotta do to not miss an episode.
Today's episode is called The Worry Wrench. Now, motorcycle riding has an inherent element of danger associated with it. It's important for motorcyclists to be able to see possible scenarios that could play out on the road so they can keep themselves out of trouble. No one wants that. That said, no one is going to have a good motorcycle riding experience if their entire focus is on all the ways things could go wrong. This would take away the joy of riding. The same can be said about our lives when it comes to living in a state of worry. Constantly indulging in what ifs and worst case scenarios is a mental habit that can have detrimental effects on our well-being. On today's podcast, we're talking about worrying. We'll dive into how worry impacts our lives, and we'll share strategies on dealing with it.
And of course, we're going to share the motivation maintenance at the end. We're going to share a tool that you can start using today to start on the path toward quieting that worried mind. This is your motivation. Okay, this worried mind. We worry out of control. We worry out of the need to control outcomes. And we want to control that because we want to protect ourselves and we want to prepare ourselves. And we think that by worrying about it, that we're going to somehow figure out this magic solution that protects us from life, which is, it's not, and it's an impossibility because you can never completely prepare yourself nor protect yourself for the very real difficult moments of life. And this is the component which I've really loved about our motorcycle community is that you kind of have a lot of people that are almost immediately built into that. They're willing to live life and the risks that come with it, and trumping that part of us that say something really bad could happen because this is a hobby that's dangerous. This is a hobby that comes with real risk. And if something goes wrong when you're riding a motorcycle, it doesn't usually just slightly go wrong. It's between your body and a mountain, the body and a cliff, your body and pavement, your body and a car. And you can only put so many things on to protect yourself when you're taking this risk. But there's this insane experience that comes out of riding your motorcycle that it's so difficult to even put into words to describe to people that don't ride. And you may have something in your life that's separate that you're like, oh no, I have this feeling with something, whatever that looks like in your life. But you have this group of people, and for us, this group of women that all kind of take on the philosophy of, yes, there is risk. Yes, there is some really scary aspects, but it is so worth leaving the worry behind or ignoring that part that doesn't, yes, it's very real risks, but it's not enough that you stop living your life or you live in a perpetual state because you miss out on so many incredible experiences because you're essentially in this paralysis that is created by worry. And the only part that I want to bring in with kind of the human behavior behind it is that paralysis comes in a state of you are tricking your brain into thinking that you are having to survive by using this worry, that this worry is somehow keeping you alive because that's the part of the brain that we used worry way back centuries ago to keep you alive when a tiger was chasing you, when you were in actual real danger and your brain had to decide the best way to manage keeping you alive. But now it's gone to this extraordinary, it's like on steroids when it comes to the news and social media and all these areas that we're just in this constant state of like stress and worry.
And Lori, I think you bring up a really great point because when we talk about worry, there's kind of two facets to it. The one that you're alluding to about our behavioral, that worry is warranted. There's still essences of that still live within us. That worry is necessary when you are on a motorcycle to an extent to think, hey, this car is coming a little bit too fast on this turn. Your body's going to be alerted, and then that provides you the ability to react. But what we're really addressing on the podcast today is that other tip of the iceberg, as you were saying there, being on the bike and be constantly worried about the worst case scenarios and your brain mapping to get to those worst case scenarios. Because all of a sudden you're shifting your brain into another thought pattern that essentially becomes addicted to the state of worry. And now all of a sudden you're mapping on this loop that really gets you entrenched in this negative thought cycle. And that is something so important to recognize in oneself, because awareness is always the first step to fixing the problem. I love this topic, Lori, because when I was a little kid, I remember my dad used to have all these plaques in his home office. And there was one that stood out to me, even from a young mind, that I take with me today. And it's so simple. For every 60 seconds of sadness or anger, you lose 60 seconds of happiness. I think the same thing applies. For every 60 seconds we dedicate to worry. I'm not talking about the car driving too fast. I'm talking about worry about something in the future that you have absolutely no control over. You are not experiencing in that present moment. You're losing 60 seconds of your life that you've now could have been living. And to me, I think that's the most worrisome thing of all. If you're not living in the present and spending your time living in that state of worry, you're really doing yourself a massive disservice. And unfortunately, that whole thought pattern can be something that takes hold, that now you're living your entire life with that lens, with that angle. And that's no way to be.
Isn't that the truth? That when you, every second that you're giving towards this state of mind of living in a future that hasn't happened yet, and not even a one that you want to step into. Like, that's one thing if you're like visualizing and manifesting like this beautiful future that you want to step into. That's a very different thing from visualizing a future that is bringing you suffering. It's a saying that I've said to you before of like, I've had to be very conscious of, why would I suffer over potential suffering to come? If that suffering is coming down the road for me, no matter what, traumas or losing loved ones or real heartbreak, disappointment, failures, if that's coming down the pipe regardless, why am I suffering about the suffering to come? Why am I doubling down on that experience? And that's that part where we think that by practicing this, somehow it's going to lighten that load when it does come. It's going to alleviate some of that suffering. I promise you it doesn't. And if anything, you end up becoming more entrenched because you're not actually practicing living in the moment. You're not practicing of being aware of what is working or what you are blessed with or what you still have ahead of you or all those different things. You just go further and deeper down, and it ends up validating for you the worry. I knew this was going to happen.
Right?
You know, this is why I worried. It clicked to me with riding motorcycles of, you are taught when you're going around a turn that you don't look down at where you are, you look where you're going. So if you're going to the end of a big curve, you look at the end of the curve, not straight ahead, because you're going to go where you're looking. And sometimes you're going to bring in these things that you're so scared of, these experiences that you're trying to avoid out of worry. You're going to actually bring that into your life when we kind of always reference vibrations. I know some people, my gosh, it's like they moved into a house with mold, like the most random thing, like back to back to back to back to back kept happening. And when I met them, I was just like, at first you're like, you got really, that is really bad luck. But then you start to get to know those people and you're like, oh no, you're vibrationally like, choose this house, even though this has mold, even though you're not consciously, but it's that same thing of like, you are drawing in all of these really stressful, dangerous situations into your life because you are constantly living in a perpetual state of woe is me, worry, what if, what if, what if? Those what ifs. I hate that what if. What if this happened? What if it doesn't? So why am I wasting my time on what if it does? Maybe prep a little bit. Okay, what if this happens? Put one thing in line so you're a little bit prepared and then move the fuck on.
That's exactly it. It's compartmentalizing the worry, because that's the thing I want to emphasize. It's not a matter of worrying not existing. That would not be life. That's not possible. But it's when you don't take the time to turn it off, you become a chronic worrier, which I know can be affiliated and linked with generalized anxiety disorder. And I think it is important to mention, neither of us are therapists. We are so big believers. If you are in a negative thought pattern and you need help, like seek the help from the professionals out there. We have amazing talented individuals. But it is, I think what I hope people take away from this is if you're able to recognize those patterns within yourself, because chronic worrying isn't just detrimental to your mental well-being and your vibrational well-being, where you're all of a sudden attracting more negativity into your life, but it's going to come out physically too. If you are worried all the time, think about it. Insomnia, people dealing with headaches. There's so many different chronic conditions that all of a sudden.
Ulcers
Yes.
is literally from a state of worrying. Like that's what ulcers are. It comes with some very serious repercussions other than just like you kind of feel shitty.
And saying that, I hope if all of a sudden you're like, oh shit, I'm a chronic worrier, please do not worry that now you're going to get ulcers and all of that. Like,
we've just given, they're just like, oh, for the love of God, I'm dying. I'm dying.
We don't say it for that. But when I was doing a little bit of research for this podcast, I saw this quote that I couldn't have loved anymore. And I know we always do a quote at the end, but this one I think is just so on topic for addressing really the high level of what you're doing in the situation. And here we go. I need to find out who said this, but worry is interest you pay on debt you may not even owe. I'm going to say it again for you. Worry is interest you pay on debt you may not even owe. So let's translate that quote into real life. Could you imagine, Lori, paying interest, let's say on a $10,000 loan, but it's not your loan? Maybe you thought about getting a loan one day, but I'm just going to pay interest on it anyways. No, you would not do that. So why would you do that with your life? But that's essentially what you're doing with this constant state of focusing on what if this happens, this could possibly happen, and having your brain take you on this path to the worst case over and over again. And then before you know it, almost every subject matter that you'll bring up, you'll catch it in yourself, where all of a sudden the first thing out of your mouth is the thing that could go wrong instead of the thing that could go right. And we know when we talk about manifesting, because I'm sure a manifesting podcast is going to happen, you're not setting yourself up for success. But you may not even see it at that point, because as you were saying before, Lori, it does translate into that woe is me. Everything is happening to me. But really, it's all you're looking for. You're looking for it well before it's even in front of you.
Oh, absolutely. We spoke of it on our other podcast of momentum. It works in this regard. If you're just compounding and thinking about worrying and thinking about the things that would go wrong, you end up being like, I don't want to turn this way because I know that that could happen over here. And I don't want to go this way because that could happen over here. So if I just stay right here, it's not the most comfortable, but at least I'm alive and safe and I'm able to stand up and not crumple in defeat or in, shame or guilt or wherever it is, or at least everybody's alive where if I just keep standing right here. And that's not what life is about. We're not built for that.
You can even take states of worry on a more granular level. People that worry about how their boss looked at them. Was it maybe this or that? And then all of a sudden they take it home and let it fester and think, I'm going to get fired and lose my job. It literally can go off the rails very, very quickly. Laura, you and I were talking about this quite recently. We enjoyed a lovely lunch in the sun. And I was talking about my mom.
It was the high tea picnic. We were classy ladies. The first time.
It was delightful. But I was talking about my mom. I grew up. I love her dearly. We are the best of friends. I was raised by a perpetual worry maven. For her mindset, because it's so well trained to go in that direction, that is where it will stay. And that will be the only thing that she sees. So a state of chronic worry can really blind you to opportunity and the goodness in the world. So when we talk about strategies, one thing that I say to her all the time is a little exercise, because as we said off the top, worry is an important component of our behavioral nature, but it's not a place or a state that we need to stay. So if she's looking at something and goes right to the problem, I'll say, okay, let's map out what that looks like then. Let's carve out 10 minutes to play that scenario out. And so I'll have her repeat what she thinks the worst case scenario is. And I'm like, okay, if you're faced with that in the future, then what would we do? And normally, even not experiencing the worst case, if you play it through, you realize even that space your brain has invented isn't so bad. And you realize that you're equipped with the solutions. But without having that conscious intervention, if it was her mapped line of thought to the worst case scenario, it would only have more spin-offs of bad, horrible things that also are an invention of the mind. You're literally using your imagination to sabotage yourself.
Oh, yeah. It would have been about 15 years ago now. And my dad is a heavy chain smoker. He just has a more unhealthy lifestyle. Just put it that way at the end of the day. And I had such a worry that he was going to die soon that I would cry often, like bawling cry at the thought of like, I'm going to lose my dad soon because his lifestyle is so unhealthy. I wrote songs about it, not in a cheesy way, like quite literally wrote songs to help myself almost as like a therapeutic way of expressing my fears for him. I had a conversations with him about him. Like, these are real fears I have for you. And he was like, I can understand why, but I'm here. I'm doing well. And it was like, yeah, I know, but that worry got so confusing that I genuinely thought it was an instinct. Like, I had an instinct that my dad was going to be passing soon. And it felt so real that I was mourning him quite literally as he was alive. And then he just kept staying alive and healthy. And this is 15 years ago that this started. And it lasted for about, I'd say, 5 to 6 years, maybe even 7, 8. And I got to the point where I was like, how long are you going to do this? And you're focusing on the fact that he's going to be gone. And it wasn't like I focused on that when I was with him, but when I wasn't with him, it actually hung over me. And it was like, let this shit go. What are you carrying? This is ridiculous. And on top of it, you're going to have so many more memories tainted with sorrow and grieving of him once he does actually move on to, passing on, than actual, right? All the gratitude around him being alive. I just got off the phone with him literally before we started this podcast. And he is alive and he is well.
But that's the loop. I totally can relate to it on a really much smaller level. I can think back to planning my wedding, because one thing that you mentioned there is tainting an experience. I was getting married in Dominican Republic, and I was so obsessive about what the weather would be, because I had envisioned exactly how everything was going to go, as many brides do. We were going to get married on the beach, and I was going to have a dance party on the beach, and that's the way it was going to be, and that's the only way it was going to be. And as the date got closer, I got so concerned about the forecast, which I have zero control over, but literally, instead of the excitement I should have had leading up to that day, I was beside myself in my gut, worrying about that particular day on the holiday, that it was going to be horrible weather and what have you. And let me tell you, it actually rained torrentially on my wedding day. Like full out horrible thunderstorms, etc. We did manage to get married on the beach, but the whole reception completely got flipped around. But even on that day, having to make decisions around that, I was investing so much worry, like even in the wedding moment, then I was thinking about, well, what's going to happen later, instead of just being in the moment and enjoying all the elements of the experience. Because of that, we have really cool photos. I'm obsessed with clouds, with like the best clouds ever. And then because of that as well, the photographers offered to do a whole separate photo session where we went paragliding in our wedding gear because we're weird and do shit like that. But there were all these more epic experiences coming out of the thing that I was stupidly fearful of and worrying of the most. And I can't even tell you, Lori, there's probably an embarrassing amount of days or weeks that I was getting so sick to my stomach worried about an outcome on a day that I had zero control over, whether it was going to rain or it wasn't going to rain. Something as simple as that, but it definitely tainted that experience in an essence. Don't get me wrong. Had a great day, made great memories, but I do know there were elements that I was sabotaging myself from the get-go over something so dumb.
What you said kind of rang a little bell for me, because a lot of times the worry and a lot of times what gets us kind of on that the hamster wheel of it is because we're kind of told what to worry about, or we're told what should matter, or we're told. So we kind of just, okay. But, and then again, we're trying to control or preparation around it, sort of thing. But when you have a more connected version of like what's really important, those worries can't catch you, or it can't quite reel you in the same way. That it's just a waste of time and energy. And we end up stealing these beautiful moments from us because we're lending it, because our brain, we can't focus on two things at the same time. So if I'm focused on what's not working, then I can't focus on how beautiful this experience is.
That's where the awareness kicks in.
Yeah.
That is the sole difference between both of those, exactly, between both of those scenarios where I was allowing a future situation rob me of joy in the present moment that I was in.
Perfect.
And at the end of the day, that is what worry is. So having those mindfulness strategies to catch yourself. And again, maybe you set a little time, like in this instance, having a solid brain plan ahead of time probably could have eased some of the concern. So this is where worry can serve a function. But if you just let worry manifest in your brain and not do anything about it and only focus on those outcomes, that is an absolute disaster. Why would we rob ourselves of that joy? And why would we allow ourselves to get addicted to that cycle so that all of a sudden your 60 seconds of happiness that you've traded off becomes a week, becomes a month? Does it become a year? Does it become decades of your life where all of a sudden you're in that thought cycle pattern? And the scary reality is it can. It takes work. One of the number one things that my mom says, and I have to use her as an example because I think that the reason why I'm so conscious and try and catch myself to not be in a perpetual state of worry is because of how I was raised. I saw it happen and I saw the effects of it. But she'll often say, I don't know how you do that. I would be thinking of X and Y, like how all of a sudden you flip your brain like that. I wish I was like you. I'm not programmed the way you are. And I step back and go, no. This is practiced. Do I always succeed? No, everyone fails. Everyone fails. I don't care how far in a self-work journey you are. You should expect failure. If not, well, you're probably really going to disappoint yourself. But for her, she's so convinced that this is who she is and how she identifies to be, and that there's no other way to change it. But at the end of the day, it takes the work. You have to put yourself into the mental work. You have to, phase one is a state of awareness. If all of a sudden you're listening to this and thinking, I have these types of behaviors, it doesn't make you a bad person at all. But I do hope for you, and I wish for you, and I dream for you to take on the tools to look at life another way.
Well, let's give them the tools, at least one tool, at least something. Because that's it.
Lori, are you alluding to,
motivation? Oh, I was going to try and hold it, but I ran out of breath.
It happens. So, Lori, what is one tool that we can provide our little worried minds out there?
So when we say it in our brain's like a runaway train. Choo choo, you have to stop that train. So one of the things is either you say it out loud, because a lot of times when we say things out loud, we hear how ridiculous it sounds, or we feel how exaggerated, or hear how exaggerated it is, or you write it down on paper. For me, it works really well. I'm a big journaler, but for this, it works very well when I say it out loud, because then I usually have a concise answer. And so whatever the worry may be. So let's use my dad as that example. And I'm starting to go down that thing. And I will state it of like, I am scared that my dad is going to die. Is that a real fear? Yeah. Is he alive right now? Yeah. Will he die one day? Yep. But is he alive right now? Yeah. So should you be spending your time being worried that he will die one day, which he will, it's inevitable, and you're scared that it's soon? Or should you be happy and appreciative that he's alive today. Happy and appreciative alive today. Okay, what's one thing that you could do to alleviate this sad feeling? Call my dad and take advantage of the fact that he's alive today and have a conversation with him and be happy that I got to have that conversation. So when I break it down, I stop that. And if I can't call my dad that day, it's one of those things of like, write something beautiful that you appreciate about your dad, or leave a voicemail on his answering machine. Yes, he has an answering machine that
Don't they all?
just tells them that, tell them that you love him. Tell him that you're so what he means to you. Use that moment that you have so that one day when he is gone, which is inevitable because we all die, you are going to say, oh my goodness, I made the most of any moment I was conscious enough to because worrying about him passing is a waste of my time. It doesn't do any good for me or my dad. And it's nothing I can carry into the future either. And so whatever that looks like, say it out loud, answer yourself out loud, break it down, because so much of what we begin to worry about, and that's a real worry, yes, but there's so many other bullshit things that we let run away from us that are so ridiculous. And when you say it out loud, there's so many ones where I say out loud and I'm like, oh, that's stupid. And I leave it there. And I don't even need to have a conversation with myself because I'm like, well, that's stupid. Anyways,
And
moving
we all
on.
have those ones where you're like, wow, I don't even know why I invented that. But
Yeah.
I believed it 5 seconds ago. And now that I hear it again, it seems absurd.
Yeah. And to be clear, I'm not calling myself stupid. I'm not suggesting you call yourself stupid, but what I'm worrying about is stupid. It's definitely not intelligent. So that thought is a stupid thought. I'm not stupid for having it. I'm intelligent because I caught it.
Yes. Oh, that's such a good one. My motivation maintenance is going to come down to movement because I know to practice awareness and move myself away from a thought cycle that's not going to serve me, or be investing in a scenario in the future that's probably not even real when I say it out loud. Sometimes it does become impossible. So you think in your head to shake it off. You start to think, oh no, I'm just going to keep thinking about this and I'm not going to be able to rid myself of this thought. Get moving. Put on your headphones, pick a podcast, maybe ours, or your favorite tunes. And I'm not saying you need to go balls to the wall with a crazy exercise. It is incredible what a 20-minute brisk walk can do. If I find myself getting and feeling that anxiousness fester in my gut over a future scenario, that either A, the outcome is going to happen either way, but I'm not in that moment, or B, I've created an outcome, because our brains can be a real fun place to play sometimes. Go for that 20-minute brisk walk and then reevaluate those steps of saying things out loud if that hasn't cleared your head enough. Because exercise, even in the smallest form, has a very direct correlation in reducing our anxiety levels. That is science. And so if you can use that physical tool to get a little bit of that mobility, it is amazing how much it can heal your brain, because there is certainly a mind-body connection. We talked about it at the beginning there, how a sour mind with worry can quite literally sour your stomach with ulcers. Well, how about we use that same mechanism in reverse? Do something good for your body to help shake away the worried state of mind. And if you are finding yourself in a situation of chronic worry, perhaps linked to a generalized anxiety disorder, I just want to emphasize on the tail end, don't be afraid to seek help. But most certainly don't listen to this and think there's something wrong with me, because I'm sure you're a beautiful, awesome human. You've just practiced a behavior in a direction that's not serving you well. But I have full belief you do the work, you're going to be able to reverse that and live with a beautiful, clear mind and a different way of thinking.
Yes, yes, yes to everything you just said. Absolutely. When you can't get out of your head, get into your body. And yes, seek help. It's massive. Counseling has been, when I couldn't help myself, wowzer, has it saved my life numerous times when depression or anxiety was just out of control. So that is not a form of weakness. That is a strength to say, I need help. Absolutely.
Hell yes. Well, I think wrapping it there, that's your motivation.
Well, we still got our quotes.
Fuck.
But
You'll stop.
that is still your motivation. That was very motivating, but we got a little extra on the tail end. Bonus.
What's your quote today?
I was like, I want to read my quote, Christy.
Like, we do this every time. I'm worried that we aren't going to be saying our quotes.
Right? I spent so much time. So I love this. This is the traditional AA program mantra. God, that sounded so intense. God, Lord. Okay.
You did throw out a hallelujah earlier, just saying.
All right. Wowzer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. I don't know who says
Love it. I think that's called the Desiderata, but don't quote me on it.
No pun intended.
I don't know why I don't know why that popped out of my mouth, honestly, or where that information comes from, but maybe we'll have a little Google after this.
Yeah.
I'm really terrible at attributing quotes to the right people, and hopefully I make up for this on social in the future. But worrying is using your imagination to create something that you don't want.
Now that is your motivation.
You've just listened to the Motivation Podcast with your host, Chrissy Van, and me, Lori Joy Kingwell.
Thanks for joining us along the ride. We've got new episodes dropping every Monday, and we're all about community. So follow us on Instagram at Motivation Podcast and visit our website at themotivation.com.
And in the meantime, tanks full and full throttle.